Hi and welcome to the Brian Joyce Report. I'm Senator Brian Joyce. I have the pleasure of representing you in the Massachusetts Senate, representing the Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth District. I'm in my 7th term, and through the years I've tried to bring some interesting and informative guests to your living room through this television show. And it's funny, about 5 years ago, in March of 2005, I introduced you to someone I suspect virtually all of you had never heard of. My next door neighbor, a fellow by the name of Deval Patrick. And Deval and I go back probably 20 years, and from time to time would take the trolleys and the trains into Boston together. We were working at different law firms, and as far back as I think it was 1992 or so, he had expressed some interest to me in politics. At that time, it looked like there was going to be an open congressional seat, so I always knew he had the bug. And then about 2004, say November or so, he called me and said he wanted to go have dinner, perhaps with our wives, and he had something he wanted to chat with me about. And I remember that Mary and I were quite busy with our children. It was just about Christmas time, and it took us a while to get together, but eventually we had a meeting in my living room, and I think it turned out to be Deval Patrick's first campaign meeting in his quest to be governor, at that time a very long shot quest. And in March of 2005 we filmed a show where we introduced him to you, and today we thought we'd show you that show again, followed by a more current version that we're about to film. So enjoy this, and we'll be back in just a minute. Hi and welcome. I'm Senator Brian Joyce, and welcome to my show. I've had the pleasure of representing the Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth District, 10 towns south of Boston, in the Massachusetts Senate. And I've now served, it's incredible, the years go by quickly. I've served 8 years. I'm entering my 9th year of service in the legislature. I've had the opportunity to serve in the Weld, Cellucci, Swift, and now Romney administrations. And it's interesting that after a while there are very few people that can inspire me, I guess. And I didn't have the advantage of being cognizant of what was going on politically during President Kennedy's administration, for example. And President Kennedy inspired a whole generation of Americans to public service. But there is a sense, I think, among the electorate that we're looking for someone who can inspire a passion for politics, for public service. And today, well, we might have found such a person. I want to introduce you to my friend Deval Patrick, who is about to become officially a candidate for governor of Massachusetts. And before I introduce him, I want to just read something that I read in a Patriot Ledger article that came out this past weekend. And it was, the writer was David Mattel, and it says, "It is the sense of a fair prince arrived in the presence of tired men and tired ideas with new inspiration. Deval Patrick is articulate, friendly, and relaxed, but serious. I expect him to be an effective phenom." And he drew a parallel to the phenoms that we have in the field of play in baseball. So let me introduce, I put a lot of pressure on you now,
sure are.
our phenom, but a warm, articulate, dear friend, and I think could be a very effective leader for the Commonwealth, Deval Patrick.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Senator. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, not too many people watching have had the pleasure of meeting you or know too much about you. So for our, I guess, intro, why don't you just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you. To that point, one of my favorite headlines in the articles that have been written since I've been thinking about getting into this race was one in the Patriot Ledger that began, "Deval who?" and had a big question mark. So I'm happy for the opportunity to introduce myself to some of your listeners. Of course, they and watchers, they don't know that we are neighbors and have known each other for a long time in Milton. I came to Massachusetts 35 years ago now, from the south side of Chicago, a life of want, of deeply segregated and ill-equipped schools, of gang violence and limited hope. And it was through a program called A Better Chance that I was able to get a scholarship to come to Milton Academy in 1970. So when I arrived at Milton Academy, it was one of those perfect New England late New England days in September when, or late autumn days in September where there wasn't a cloud in the sky and just a slight breeze, the color just beginning to turn. And I remember thinking I'd never seen so much privately owned lawn in one place before. It was a profound difference in the life I had led, or from the life I had led in Chicago. And I was able to be here, to go to Milton Academy, to go to Harvard College, eventually to Harvard Law School. There were enlightened programs and people and institutions here in Massachusetts that gave me both preparation for and exposure to a variety of opportunities. But more than that, really a sense of what's possible. And that sense of what's possible, I think, is very much something that public leadership can offer, and that I'm interested in offering really as a return gift, if you will, to the people of Massachusetts.
Now, you were how old in 1970 when you came to
14.
Milton? 14 years old.
14 years old, yes.
And what was it, a particular school teacher recognized a little bit of intellectual talent in young Deval Patrick?
Well, I hope so. There were you know, I had that great advantage of having had a couple of teachers who made me feel like I'd been touched by fire, you know, who made me feel very excited about a life of learning and about, again, what's possible. And I had a 7th grade English teacher who knew about the A Better Chance program, who introduced my mother and I to it, and we went through the application process. In those days, you had 3 choices for in the public schools in Chicago. You could go to the general high school in your school district, to a vocational school, or to a technical school. And I was really interested in becoming an architect, as a matter of fact, but the technical school on the south side was just not very good, and the one on the north side didn't accept any south side students. And that really left the general high school in our school district, which is where we had our junior high classes, and it had 40 or 50 kids in every classroom, and police at every intersection in the corridors, and no glass left in any of the windows. It was either boarded up or had plexiglass because the Woodlawn riots had come through the town. So it's hard to overstate how profound that change was for me to come to Milton Academy. And it was there as well, again, through the good fortune of having been exposed to great teachers and wonderful, caring adults, that I think I've been able to build on that and expose myself to some wonderful opportunities.
So you come to Milton, and they had a dress code, didn't they?
They did. They had a dress code. They had a. That's right. They had a. You've heard this story. They had a dress code, and boys were instructed to wear jackets and ties to classes. But a jacket on the south side of Chicago was a windbreaker. So my grandparents, when they got the clothing list, splurged on a new windbreaker. So the first day of classes, all the other boys are putting on their blue blazers and their tweed coats, and I had my windbreaker. So I had a lot to learn. You can see I figured it out on the whole.
You dressed well. So
thank you.
You did well at Milton Academy. You then went on to Harvard College.
That's right. First in my family to go to college.
First in your family to go to college.
In fact, I remember, and excuse me if I keep telling these stories, but I remember getting notice that I'd gotten admitted to college, and I called home. I got my grandmother on the phone, and I said, "Gram, I'm going to college next year. I'm going to Harvard." And she was so excited. She cheering and crying and all that. And she paused for a minute, and she said, "Now, where is that anyway?" And I think there's a wonderful message in that. I really do. I think the message in that is that it was not the prestige that was important. It was the chance. Sure. It was the opportunity.
Sure. I mean, many of us recognize, for those of you who can't get into Boston College, where I attended, I mean, Harvard's a pretty good safety school. It's a good place to fall back on.
It's the BC of Cambridge.
Yeah. So you went to Harvard College. Studied what?
I studied English and American literature.
English and American literature. Then what did you do upon graduation?
When I graduated, I had something called a Rockefeller Fellowship, which gave me a chance to travel in Africa for a year. And I worked with the UN in Sudan, actually out in the Darfur region you've been reading about recently on a development project. And I spent a year there on that, and decided while I was away that I wanted to go to law school, and applied and came back again to Harvard.
Now, you lost your mom recently, Emily,
I did.
who I've had the pleasure of knowing.
Indeed.
And you had a funny story about Emily when you were in the Sudan and her coming to visit you.
That's right. When I was in Sudan, I spent most of the time about 500 miles away from Khartoum, the capital city. And the little town where I was had no mail or phone service. And I'd been out there probably 3, 4 months. When I got back to Khartoum, it was almost Christmas time, and there were boxes of letters waiting for me at the post office. And so I went and I got all the letters. I put them all in order by postmark and so forth. And I was just reading through these letters from home, months and months of communication. About the third day, I got to a letter that my mother had written, and it said, "Meet me in Nairobi, in Kenya, for Christmas." And very exciting to get that letter. I had never been outside the United States before. She had never been outside the United States before. So it was great. I've been away for, at this point, probably about 6 months. And, but mind you, it said nothing else. It didn't say what airline she was coming in on, flight number, what day she was arriving, what hotel she was staying in. Just meet me in Nairobi for Christmas. And in those days, it was very hard to make a phone call from Khartoum back to the United States, or certainly to send a cable. So, and there was no email, of course. So I scrambled to get to Nairobi on the day she said she would be traveling. I got there the day before. At midnight of the day she appointed, I went to the international airport in Nairobi, and I met every international arrival for a day and a half. Because it took her that long to show up. And when she finally walked out, she said, "You know, I didn't expect to see you." Yeah, we had a wonderful visit.
Emily was a wonderful woman who would march around the neighborhood with her dogs, and we were very fond of
With
her.
our dogs, yeah.
And you were then accepted to Harvard Law School
Yes.
and studied there, and upon graduation,
Then I went out to California and clerked on the Ninth Circuit, the Federal Court of Appeals, for a year. I then came back to.
you met someone out there, didn't
I
you?
met the woman who's now my wife out there. In fact, I was planning to go to a different city entirely, but you know, proving again that life is what happens while you're making plans. I met Diane, and we moved to New York, where she's from. And I practiced for 3 years at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund doing civil rights work. She's also a lawyer, and she was practicing in a firm in downtown New York. And we had our first daughter, Sarah, and we looked at New York differently and decided we wanted a little bit more order and a little bit more balance in our lives, and we moved back to Boston. So that was in 1986, and we've been living in Boston ever since, although I have worked in various places and commuted back and forth home.
So from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, you then took what position?
I came to Hill and Barlow in Boston.
And by age 30 had made partner.
I made partner there, yes. I was very fortunate.
No small feat.
I was very fortunate. It was a great firm with a deep tradition of public service. Governor Weld had been there. Governor Dukakis had practiced there. Various others. I think there'd been a Saltonstall as well who practiced there, had been governor. I spent about 30% of my time on pro bono civil rights and poverty law matters, just because they were important to me. And I was in practice there until 1994, when I was appointed by President Clinton to head the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division.
How unbelievable was that, to have the President of the United States select you, of all of the attorneys in the United States, to be the head of the Civil Rights Division?
Well, it was a wonderful experience, because I'd met the president when he was governor of Arkansas, when I sued him in a voting rights case with my colleague Lonnie Guinier, who's now a professor at Harvard Law School. And he and I worked out the settlement terms together over some period of time, got to know each other, and then we reconnected during his campaign. It was a hard job, very stimulating job, never a dull day, but an important one. We had a lot of
At one point, were you the highest ranking African American in the United States government? At least in the executive branch?
I think you're right, but you know, you remember that there was a cabinet
Ron
member
Brown, who
who
was,
died. Ron
killed in a
Brown,
plane crash.
right?
Yeah.
And then there was Hazel O'Leary on in the Energy Secretariat.
I can remember going to visit you. Deval had the office that was formerly occupied by J. Edgar Hoover.
Right.
I mean, how cool is that to be in J. Edgar Hoover's former office, from a two-bedroom apartment with your mom, your sister, and your grandparents in the south side of Chicago, to sitting in J. Edgar Hoover's office? I mean,
I think
this really is the land of opportunity.
Indeed, it is. It's a wonderful country, and I think sometimes people don't. You know, we have a lot of problems still in this country, a lot of barriers still to break down. But sometimes I think we don't stop and appreciate the fact that stories like mine, frankly, just don't happen in other parts of the world. There are ways in which you can believe in what's possible in the United States that's just different from any other nation on earth.
So you're in the Clinton administration, you're with the movers and shakers in Washington, and finally you leave public service for a while. You took a couple of very, very impressive positions in the private sector.
I was general counsel for Texaco in New York, and commuting again home to Milton, and then I did that for 2 years until we merged the company with Chevron, and the headquarters moved to San Francisco, and then I was general counsel for Coca-Cola for almost 4 years, and commuted back and forth to Atlanta, and I finished that at the end of 2004.
So to be the general counsel of Coca-Cola worldwide is perhaps one of the, I don't know, top 10 private sector legal jobs in the country. So you've done pretty well. I'm getting the hook by my friend Jerry back here. So we're going to take a little break and then fast forward now to 2005 and what we expect to see in the very near future.
Great, thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Senator Brian Joyce, and our guest is Deval Patrick, who has given really an extraordinary background. I guess he has an extraordinary background and has shared it with us. We want to see what's in the future. We've heard from Tanya, one of our camera persons, that you've captured her vote if you decide to run for governor. Tim has said the same, but seriously, I mean, that's a fairly compelling life story. And but let's get to 2005. We're all speculating that you are going to run for governor. I think by the time, I'll tell you a secret, by the time this show runs, I think it'll be official, and you'll be off and running for governor. How does that life experience play into first your decision, and then, should you prevail, your governance of Massachusetts?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I as I tried to explain earlier, my life experience, coming from Chicago to Massachusetts, all the experiences I've had since coming to Massachusetts, have really given me a sense of what's possible. And that sense of what's possible, that sense of hope, I think is a tremendous gift to be able to transfer on to others. And I think that government has a role in giving people a reason to hope. I think we have been trivializing the role of government and the people in government for a long, long time, both in the Commonwealth and nationally. I think it's time for that to end. I think it's time for us to stop making false choices or being offered false choices. You know, we can either have quality health care or universal health care, not both. I think that's a false choice, or this notion that you can have either a robust economy or social justice and not both. I think we have got to stop that. I think that we are ready again for a politics of public service, that we ought to have Democrats who run hard as Democrats but govern as statesmen and stateswomen, and who see themselves as solving real problems in real people's lives. So government as a way, as a device to advance opportunity, to advance equality, to advance fair play, I think those are the kinds of tones that our public leadership should set, and frankly, we shouldn't accept anything less than that. And we have not been getting that from the incumbent. We're not going to get it from the incumbent. And I'm doubtful that there's any other Democrat who's thinking about getting in the race who's willing to set ambitions as high as that.
So, I mean, clearly, the public officials and public service, to a certain extent during our lifetimes, has been denigrated, has been criticized, and
Right.
particularly in this post-Watergate era where, often the only time we report on our elected officials or our candidates for office is trying to report their warts or their
Right.
shortcomings.
Right.
Or are you prepared for that? I mean, you're under the glare of the Brian Joyce show. I'm sure I'm throwing softballs at you here.
Well,
But is Diane, is your family, are you prepared for some of the criticism that just is natural in this profession?
this has been a big part of the time that Diane, my wife, and my family and I have spent talking and thinking about this. Just whether we're ready for the for the for the meanness of the process. Because frankly, Brian, and I don't mean to seem arrogant or self-aggrandizing when I say it, I can do the job and do it well, and do it in a way that makes the people of Massachusetts proud. But getting from here to there is a very nasty process. But I think that the stakes are worth the effort, and I'll tell you why. As a citizen, I think we are ready again to be asked to see ourselves as citizens, to see our stake not just in our own issues and our own needs and our own struggles, but our neighbors as well. To see the interconnectedness of solutions to a variety of problems that are facing us, whether they're in the area of job creation and economic growth, which is key, or healthcare or education. Three of the issues that are top of mind for me. Barney Frank, at an event that I went to with him in Halifax a few weeks ago, said that government is the name we give to the things we choose to do together. And I thought that was as cogent and complete and hopeful a description of what government is supposed to be as I've ever heard. And it's not, by the way, to imply that there's a government solution to every problem, that there ought to be a government program for every need, not by any means. But I do think there's a place for public leadership that focuses attention on particular needs in communities, uses the convening power of the governor's office to pull the interests together, and a sense of determination to drive through to solutions.
So how do you get there? How do you, in 19 months, get sworn in as the governor of Massachusetts?
Well, there are a couple things that have to happen, and they have to happen. They don't exactly intersect, but they have to happen on, and as a result, have to happen on parallel tracks. For one thing, I have to introduce myself to my friends and neighbors in Massachusetts. Reintroduce myself to communities that I've had only a passing interaction with. And in a lot of those cases, I will tell you, it's not just, with due respect, Brian, cultivating people who are a part of the political establishment. They are important, and you are important to me, and I need you to govern when I get elected, and I want to govern with you. But I think that there is another very, very important opportunity that this campaign offers, and that is to be able to reach people who don't feel connected at all to public life. They don't feel connected to those civic ideals I was talking about of opportunity, equality, and fair play. And they don't feel they come from every community. That's the thing. They don't just come from communities of poor people and vulnerable people. They live in Milton. They're neighbors of ours. They live in every one of the 351 towns and cities in the state. They haven't been asked to be a part of the solving of the issues that face us all.
Where you come from a somewhat non-traditional background. You are not the product of the Ozzie and Harriet nuclear family. You did not go through the traditional path to where you are. You have, it seems to me, a little bit of a different perspective. You have the perspective, I guess, as a captain of industry, as the general counsel of Coca-Cola worldwide, and from government as the head of the Civil Rights Division for the United States Justice Department. But also, you were from a single-parent household. How would that impact your governance?
Well, it's all of those experiences are a part of me, Brian. You know, sometimes we reduce people to a slogan or two we think represents them. Sometimes people will look at me and they say, "Well, he's just a business person." But when I go into a cabinet meeting, yes, that business leader comes in with me, but so does the single mother come with me. So does the welfare kid come with me. So does the first-time college goer come with me. So do my neighbors. You know, when we were first moving into those houses in Milton, worried about whether we're going to be able to pay the electric bill or the mortgage in a given month, they come with me too. What I offer is a range of experiences, of life experiences and professional experiences, and a belief that it is possible to integrate those interests to drive through to real solutions.
Wow. You know, I'm inspired. Are you still inspired back there behind the camera? I am inspired, and I can tell you that this guy is my next door neighbor. Our backyards touch one another, and he's as good a person personally as he appears here professionally and as a prospective candidate for governor. It's interesting. I'm reminded somewhat of Ann Richards, the former governor of Texas, had a comment about President Bush, and I think it was about the first President Bush, but it may have been about the second. I think it was the first, at the convention where she said he was born on third base and thought he hit a triple. And you know, our own governor, His Excellency the Governor Mitt Romney, comes from a somewhat of a privileged background with his own dad having served as governor of Michigan. Here it seems to me we have a guy that you know, really earned his way to third base, and we're going to stay tuned and watch very carefully whether you're able to bring it home over the next 19 months. So
thank you, Brian.
I just want people to pay very close attention to this upcoming race. And how would they find out a little bit more about you if they wanted to get involved with your effort? Is there a website? Is there a telephone number? How would they get a hold of you?
There is a website. It'll be up shortly. It's www.devalpatrick.com, www.devalpatrick.com. And they can reach us at the office on Milk Street at 617-210-7998.
Terrific. I think that wraps it up, and Deval Patrick has been my guest. Maybe you'll come. Will you come back when you're governor?
Of course.
Excellent.
Pleasure.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi and welcome, or welcome back, depending upon whether you watched the previous half hour. I'm Senator Brian Joyce, and with me today is our guest, the governor, Deval Patrick. And if you were just watching, he was a veritable unknown 5 years ago, March of 2005, when we interviewed Deval Patrick, then a candidate. And apparently you were impressed with that show, because as a direct result of that show, we elected this guy. And honestly, I do believe that was the very first time that Deval Patrick confirmed that he was indeed a candidate for governor. One of the things I remember was when you were a candidate.
I had less gray hair than
you had less
I'm
gray
sure.
hair. Just be thankful for what you have. And I remember leaning over the fence, and you were in your driveway, and one of the comments you had during the campaign was, "Wow, this is hard," because of those long, long days of tracking across the state. Since then, you've gotten the job, and I suspect you found that to be pretty hard as well. And given that shortly after your election, we had the global economic meltdown, really. Perhaps economic challenges faced that you've faced were as great as any of your 70 predecessors in the corner office. We had the implementation of this comprehensive health care bill at the same time. We had, frankly, no money to do it, and we've had some challenges. So is it hard? Do you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a, you know, there was I met a 9-year-old the other day, Brian, named Justin, who asked me if I liked being governor. And when I said yes without hesitation, the adults who were nearby sort of giggled in disbelief, because, as you said, it's been an incredibly difficult time. But when I see what this economy has done to people's income and savings and home values and retirement accounts, and also their confidence in the future, it's just made me want to work harder. You know, at the state level, we've been dealing, you and I and the other members of the legislature, with $9 billion plus in accumulated budget gaps, which has meant some very, very difficult decisions, really, you know, tough choices among miserable options. But we've closed that gap. We've delivered 3 budgets now so far that were responsible, balanced, and on time, not something many other states can say, because of the blended approach we took by cutting programs, reducing headcount, getting concessions from the employee unions, doing furloughs and pay freezes and everything else everybody else is having to do, meaning make do with less. We have had our AA bond rating reaffirmed 3 times now by all of the independent rating agencies. That's, again, not something many other states can say. And meanwhile, we've continued to govern. We're first in the nation in student achievement, first in the nation in health care coverage for our residents, first in the nation in veterans services and the quality and extent of those, first in the nation in clean and alternative energy policy, and particularly energy efficiency. None of that by accident. And we're investing more in rebuilding this broken infrastructure all around the Commonwealth, including in your district, as you know, than ever before in the history of the Commonwealth. And that means jobs right now, but also economic value and quality of life out for a long, long time. So there are a lot of accomplishments I'm proud of. We've had an agenda that was ambitious from the beginning, and we have not been deterred from that agenda, notwithstanding the global economic collapse, as you said.
So if you just watch the previous half hour, you see this guy has clearly grown into the job. And I'll tell you, it is a challenge. And I think that someone comes in to politics for the first time, just as I think every person thinks they could probably do a better job managing the Red Sox. I think every observer thinks they could step in and govern, and yet you did face extraordinary challenges. Here's the thing that I'll kind of reiterate a little bit about what you said. I think we have done a better job than virtually any other state in the union in weathering this storm.
Yeah.
We have passed consistently now in your tenure 3 balanced budgets. We're about to pass another one. No new taxes, no deficit spending. We're not looking for further reliance on the rainy day fund. It's a balanced, prudent budget. You know, with
it's a painful budget, though. Let's not sugarcoat it.
But it's fiscally prudent, I think. In as you say, the bond maker, the rating agencies agree, and I think we're one of what 13 states in the union that have that positive.
If that
rating?
many, and you know, in all of the years that that at least one of the challengers for office managed the state budget, he was never able to achieve a AA bond rating.
Well, that's the other thing. We'll get to that in a minute, because we're in a campaign year, so
Right.
it's a silly season, right?
It is.
So, you know, by virtually every economist's review, the economy is indeed improving, and clearly, if you're not working, that doesn't
That's
help.
right.
It's abstract,
And
and I
that's
know
an important
that.
point, right?
But it is improving. Things are clearly getting better. We're adding jobs.
Right.
But we're going to have a couple of fellows running for governor or for other seats that are going to say the world is ending, the sky is
Right,
falling.
right.
And how do you combat that?
Well, first of all, you combat it by fact. You know, we are, by all economists' measures, Massachusetts is coming out of recession faster than the rest of the country and stronger than we were before. We've had 4 consecutive months of job gains. April was the largest single monthly job gain in 17 years. Which is enormously important. Most of those jobs, all of those jobs, are coming throughout the Commonwealth. They're in every corner of the Commonwealth, and they're coming mainly in those innovation industries that we focused on: biotech and life sciences, clean and alternative energy, IT, healthcare as well. Organogenesis, which is in Canton, in your district, is one of the poster childs.
It is. Let me just tell the viewers a little bit about that. So the governor has an initiative, the life sciences. We're really an education-based economy, a knowledge-based economy.
That's right.
We're never going to compete with the folks in Bangladesh or in, you know, Islamabad or whatever in terms of labor cost necessarily.
Well, that's right, but I finish your point because I want to come back to this, because manufacturing is coming back here.
Manufacturing's coming back, that's true.
Yeah.
But our strength lies in our knowledge-based economy, our great universities and hospitals. And so you have this push for the life sciences and also for clean alternative energy.
Right.
And so bringing it home to my district, in Canton, we have a company called Organogenesis that, among other things, makes artificial skin for burn victims, for folks with ulcer. They have a new product.
Extraordinary stuff. A little creepy, but it's amazing what how it
artificial
changes
gum
people's
for the
lives.
muscles.
Yeah.
So we've worked on with your leadership, a economic incentive that, you know, we do have a fiduciary obligation to taxpayers, has resulted in that company now making a commitment to triple their workforce.
That's
They
right.
have been adding jobs, average wage $70,000, an
right.
extraordinary success story.
Well, and the other thing about the life sciences, you know, not all of these jobs are in the lab. There's a misperception that we're talking about just PhDs and folks in white coats and so forth. We're talking about IT jobs and customer service jobs and marketing and sales. There's a company called Systogenics from the UK that put their headquarters for the Americas in Quincy this year. It's a life sciences company. Not a single one of those jobs is in the lab. It's a whole range of opportunities. And that's what we have, you know, to your point, we are a knowledge-based, we are known around the world as a highly educated workforce, and with good reason. And we've been marketing that. What are those? That's really our sweet spot. So what are those industries that can create an American-based economic edge and take advantage of our unique strengths here in the Commonwealth? The life sciences is an example of that. You mentioned clean and alternative energy. We've had a quadrupling of the number of solar manufacturing and installation companies in the last 3.5 years, almost tripling the number of people who work in that field. We have the largest wind blade testing facility under construction right now in Charlestown. They'll be testing blades for wind projects all over the country, right here in Massachusetts. That's jobs today.
You have First Wind, headquartered in Boston.
That's exactly
You have
right.
Cape Wind, the first offshore project in the
America.
country.
That's right. That's right.
Just
So
got
it's
approved.
coming, and this is and it's happening right now. You know, and this is not some abstraction out into the distant future. It's something that we envisioned at the time I ran. It's an agenda we have driven. It's the reason, by the way, Brian, that we have not gone as deep into recession as the rest of the country, and it's the reason we're coming out stronger.
So I'll tell you, you have a very, very capable team around you. You have a Secretary of Economic Affairs, and Greg Bielecki, who's coming out to the district with me in a couple of weeks. One example, I have a company in Randolph called Aquavita, where, you know, we're all drinking water, we're cognizant of the health benefits, but a lot of us were drinking out of those plastic water bottles, and we're realizing that's not necessarily good for the environment, and maybe not good for us with the BHPs and the plastic. This company is you know, hoping to replace Coca-Cola vending machines with water vending machines, but rather than a bottle, having it dispensed right into your own personal, you know, what we used to call thermos. They have a fancier name for it now. But it's interesting. So we're bringing the Secretary of Economic Affairs, your economic development team, how we can, I think this company has terrific potential in including the manufacturing of this really terrific technology throughout the country. Things that you might not even be aware of, your team is doing, working with me in the district to create jobs. We have a similar thing going on down in West Bridgewater, and really throughout the district.
If there's a way, they'll find it.
Yeah, so you have two challenges, right? You've had to balance the budget in a tough economic environment.
That's putting it lightly.
By contrast, we saw states like California that engaged in fiscal shenanigans and essentially borrowed money, be like paying your mortgage with your credit card bill, and just exacerbated the situation. We didn't do any of that. And at the same time, we're looking to grow the economy, increase revenue. There's another
Well, those two things are related, as you know. You know, the budget is a means. It's not an end in itself. It's a means. And for me, and I think for you, Senator, because we believe government has a role to play, you know, not in solving every problem in everybody's life, but in helping people help themselves. We're trying to make the decisions in how we balance that budget in ways that enable people to help themselves, government to help themselves. And I think that the long-term strength of the budget lies in the long-term economic health of the Commonwealth. So that means we've got to be focused on how we create jobs, how we create the conditions for entrepreneurs to want to invest here. And as I say, there are facts that point to this strategy working. There's a Philadelphia Federal Reserve report that has Massachusetts economy outperforming 48 other states. We mentioned the job numbers. Home sales are coming back strong. Retail leasing has come back really, really strong. For the first time in 20 years, young people and families are moving into Massachusetts rather than moving out. That's all good news. And as you said earlier, you know, if you're the one out of work, you could care less about the good stats. That's absolutely true. So we have to continue our efforts to try to make a way for everybody. But the strategy that we have pursued that is based on education, on innovation, those innovation industries, on infrastructure investment, and also spreading that investment out around the whole of the Commonwealth, that strategy is working. And this next 4 years, if the people honor me with the continued opportunity to serve, we'll see that strategy really just launch us into the strategy.
All right, let's talk about a couple of things. When you became governor, we had just passed this landmark health care bill.
Right.
So, you know, 97% of our citizens were going to get insurance and health coverage. It's funny, there's been a lot of discussion nationally, very little discussion that we've successfully implemented such a program here in Massachusetts.
Well, the national health reform is based on our model here, really.
But we had passed the bill, not necessarily implemented it when you became governor,
That's
right?
right. That's right. So job one was to get folks who were not insured, and we're at 97.5% of our residents insured today. There's not another state in America that can touch us. But it's still too expensive, particularly for working families and for small businesses. And the judgment that the legislature and the previous administration made was to do access and then come to cost. And we're really at the point where we have to deal with cost right now because the cost has gone up so sharply. And there's really very little explanation for it. You know, the cost of just about everything else has been flat or gone down. Inflation is very low. But for 2.5 years, we've had representatives of the industry, advocates, policymakers sitting around the table talking around this cost issue. And that when I say, you know, why is it that small businesses are seeing these double-digit increases every single year? The answer from every quarter always starts the same way. It's complicated, Governor. Well, we've been defeated by that complexity for a long time. And after 2.5 years of work, this team has come up with some recommendations called payment reform, which is the idea of moving away from paying for the amount of health care to paying for outcomes, for quality of care instead. It's very promising. But the very first thing they said when they delivered the recommendations in the fall is, please, Governor, take 5 years to implement it. This is too big a change to do quickly. And so I said, all right, fine, we'll take that 5 years, but we need a bridge right now from here to there. Because for small businesses, particularly as we see commercial activity picking up and they're being justified in adding 1, 2, 3 positions, they get that health insurance increase, that premium increase, and they just can't see how to do it. And I get those stories all over the Commonwealth.
So here we are. So we have 97% of our citizens now have health insurance.
Right.
That's great, but we weren't doing anything about the cost. So the cost was still rising. We have
all over the country, by the way. This is not unique to Massachusetts.
But we've taken it on, and we've done a couple of things here with your leadership. One is on the municipal level to allow our city and town governments to join the state group insurance commission.
Right.
We have greater purchasing power,
Exactly.
and we have economies of scale. We've helped reduce the cost to local cities and towns.
The idea there is to try to get the pressure off the property tax.
Exactly. Just last week, actually, Secretary Bigby, we just announced $100,000, for example, to Milton Hospital to get them over to electronic billing, so as to reduce the inefficiencies in the delivery of healthcare services.
Right.
But here's the big thing: the big insurers, Harvard Pilgrim, Fallon, Tufts, Blue Cross, they all just came in and wanted 20% or something rate increase for small business.
20% on a good day.
On a good day. So what happened?
So we had a.
What'd you say? Yes?
Well, no. We said no, emphatically. You know, we have some residual or existing power in the Commissioner of Insurance to disapprove excessive or unreasonable rate increases. That power has not been used, mainly because in this environment, the previous administration and we have tried to let the market sort it out. But as I say, after 2 years of It's Complicated, Governor, and seeing small businesses with these 24, 33, 45%, 60% increases, and employers still trying to do the right thing by providing insurance to their employees, unless they are able to get some economic breathing room, then small businesses are fragile. And the reason to be particularly concerned about that right now is that small businesses make up 85% of the businesses in the Commonwealth, 50 employees or fewer. If they don't start hiring, we don't get a recovery. It's really as simple as that. And so to give them some relief, I authorized the commissioner to use that authority to disapprove unreasonable rates. And I asked, more to the point, the commissioner asked those carriers, look, justify these rates. Explain to us why, if medical cost inflation, you say it's the hospitals charging you. If their rate of increase is about 5%, why are you charging 24 and more percent to small businesses? Essentially, they couldn't justify it. So they were disapproved in April. There's been litigation. We've won the first couple rounds. And I think now the carriers realize we're serious about that, so there's some negotiations to see if we can't have a negotiated bridge to payment reform instead of a regulatory bridge to payment reform. But the point is, we need relief right now.
So sometimes you have to play the dragon slayer a little bit when you're the governor, right?
Well, sometimes you do. I mean, I try to be a consensus builder as much as possible, but you have to. My patience is gone on this one.
Let me shift gears. You got some criticism for the stimulus dollars that we were getting from the feds for not spending it as quickly as you might otherwise. And here's my read on that. We could have blacktopped every road in the state, and it would have done nothing.
Exactly.
I see people like Jeff Mullen, your Secretary of Transportation, Greg Bielecki, I mentioned the Secretary of Economic Affairs, yourself, involved in trying to leverage the stimulus dollars into creating private sector jobs. A couple of examples, just in my own district, through the years we've seen so-called PWED, Public Works Economic Development Grants, revitalize these business districts in Milton at Central Avenue or at Milton Village and Randolph. We're about to break ground. In
New
Sharon,
curbing, lighting, and plantings.
Sharon, Stoughton, just about every town in my district now has enjoyed some sort of Public Works Economic Development grant, and what happens inevitably is it leverages private investment in the surrounding area. Now you're doing it in a far grander scale. One project that has been very sensitive, frankly, in my district is the Westwood Station project. The Westwood Station project is, as originally envisioned, 4 times or so larger than the South Shore Plaza. I mean, a huge mixed use. Now, we're all for economic development, but there was some very real concern in the neighborhoods that I represent in Canton that we protect the quality of life. We've been at this for 2.5 years or so. I think we're precariously close, and I think with your leadership, we are now looking at perhaps as much as a $30 million investment in infrastructure in Canton so as to protect the quality of life in that community.
And relieve the pressure there, that's right.
And allow this really regional economic development project to go forward. That would be a boon for the construction industry, for retail, for commercial,
You're exactly right.
residential.
You're exactly right, Brian. Let me make a couple points here. First of all, we have been criticized for being slow to move some of that federal recovery money out. That's not entirely supported by the facts. We're consistently rated, Massachusetts is, in the top 10 states in effectiveness in moving the money out and onto the ground and putting it to work, and people to work, most importantly. We did hold some of it aside to leverage private investment, as you said, because most of the road money we got, most of the infrastructure money we got was for roads, so-called horizontal construction. What we're trying to do is
horizontal as opposed to vertical, being buildings.
Exactly. And what we're trying to do is use that money in ways that would enable vertical construction. And there's some examples of that around the Commonwealth. Westwood Station is one of them. So being able to direct some of that money to Westwood Station to enable, for road work, to enable them to get on with the, and to resolve some of the issues with the abutters, with Canton and other concerns, to get on with the vertical construction is exactly, I think, the wisest and smartest use of that money. And I will say also that with Westwood Station, the involvement of Canton and its residents and those who had concerns has made this project better. It really has made it better. It doesn't always make it easier or simpler, but it's better. And I think it's got to be acknowledged that your advocacy around Westwood Station, around all those P-Wed
Well, you know, it's interesting because I've worked very
too.
closely with Bill Galvin, the rep, on that issue, and it, you know, on the one hand, I absolutely want to promote economic development. We're all about jobs, and yet we also have an obligation to protect the quality of life in the neighborhoods we represent.
And multiple bottom lines.
And here's one where really your administration, we've been at the table for, you know, some 2.5 years. I think our issues are resolved, and I am confident that the quality of life in Canton will be protected to the greatest extent possible, and that this project will go forward. So I've been impressed, not just with you, but with your team around you.
It's a good team. Thank you. Thank you for that.
So we're about to, this week, now this will show for some time, but as we sit here in the Senate, we're looking at a new source of revenue, and that's casino gambling. And you know, it's funny, people ask me, should we have gambling in Massachusetts? And my response is, we've had gambling in Massachusetts since the 70s when people voted in the lottery. It's now about $1 billion a year source of revenue. But the question is, are we going to have, you know, slots at the tracks? Are we going to have destination casinos? You've come out for which?
Well, I support the idea of a limited expansion in the form of destination resort casinos as distinct from slots at the tracks. Now, a couple points I want to make here. First of all, for some of our residents, some of our citizens, the whole idea of having any expanded gaming is just wrong. And for them, it's a moral issue, and you have to acknowledge that. You know, that's not where I am, but I just want to acknowledge that some people have those fundamental concerns about it. I think if we go down this path, then we should do this in a way that maximizes the number of good jobs at good wages and benefits, that minimizes the human impact, because there is human impact. Anybody who talks about this without acknowledging that isn't telling the whole story. And in a way that doesn't jeopardize the success of the lottery and doesn't really you know, suck business away from all those wonderful small businesses and so forth that we have in different regions of the Commonwealth. I believe they ought to be spread out. My original proposal was 3. I think the Senate bill has 3 in it as well. They'd be spread out around the Commonwealth, so we take advantage of differences in the tourist trade in different regions of the Commonwealth. I think that they ought to be, rather than just slot parlors and just gambling, they ought to be in a resort setting, so you get the shopping and the dining and the entertainment, recreation hotels and all that. And all of the studies and all of the experience shows you get more jobs in that setting and at higher wages and benefits than you would by just having slots at the tracks.
I think it's also important to note that informing your decision, our collective decision, things have changed in the past 10 years. There's been several changes. One is the federal recognition for the Wampanoag, I think it's the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, that under a federal law gives them the right to essentially do anything in the state that is otherwise allowed. So that comes into play the technological advances where we allow, for example, bingo in Massachusetts. Bingo is not necessarily, you know, your mother in the church basement with a dauber and a lot of smoke anymore. Someone put down in front of me a bingo machine, and next to it was a slot machine, and they are indistinguishable. Indistinguishable. The results are different, and the payouts are different, but there's been technological advances, there's pressure from the federal government that this is almost inevitable, and we are losing money to surrounding states. Our residents are going to Connecticut and to Rhode Island.
$1.5 billion every year we spend in Connecticut right now.
So it seems the train has left the station, and you do seem to be taking a very thoughtful approach to how we can minimize the adverse impact and maximize the upside.
I am trying to take, and I think we all better be thoughtful about it, because this is not a small decision. There are friends and supporters of mine who are very, very concerned about the impact on the character of the Commonwealth. And I think, you know, I'm concerned about that too. And I think that if we do this, we should require a minimum investment so that the facilities are tasteful and appropriate and so on. I think we should dedicate some of the revenue to the infrastructure needs, the road and rail needs to get people back and forth to these things, and also to the human services programs that are necessary for people for whom this is not harmless entertainment. You know, for 90+% of the people who go, it's just that, harmless entertainment. But for a few people who are problem gamblers, who have addictive behaviors and so on, that's a problem. We have to concern ourselves with that, and we have to provide for that as well.
You know, I mentioned when we started that you came into an extraordinarily difficult economic situation that was just thrust upon you. Now things are improving.
Yeah.
We're adding jobs. We've balanced budgets. We've had our bond rating affirmed. You also came into a situation where, although in my experience there have been some extraordinarily gifted, smart, hardworking, decent and honorable men and women that serve in public office, there's bad seeds in every profession.
Sure.
So you came into a situation where we've had some really inexcusable breaches of the public trust from our fellow elected officials. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously that's what it does is it discourages all the good, hardworking, well-intended, and above-board behavior from all the good folks who are doing it every day. And I think it confirms in people's minds their worst fears about what goes on in state government. Overwhelmingly, what I have found is what you have found, is that people run to work. They really bring a sense of service to their work. And there are a handful of folks who are retired in place or who have just gotten greedy, who have forgotten that they work for the citizens and not for a handful of well-heeled special interests. And we have rules about that, but those rules are stronger today than they've ever been before. You know, we moved, and with your exceptional leadership on the Senate side, a significant tightening of the ethics and lobbying and campaign finance rules. It was one of a handful of big reforms that folks have been talking about for a long time on Beacon Hill, but not been able to deliver until now. We ended abuse in the state pension system, same sort of thing, where people were gaming the
Same
rules.
thing, same thing. The average public pensioner in Massachusetts is not collecting Social Security.
That's right.
Their pension is between $24,000 and $26,000
That's right.
a year.
Very
but
modest,
there are a
right.
few people that game the system. So with his leadership, we passed the toughest ethics law, I would say, in the country.
Yeah.
We passed some significant pension reform. The governor and I both got awards last week from
That's right.
Common Cause
That's
for
right.
this ethics bill.
That's great.
Let me just, we're running out of time. I want to throw a few things at you quickly, okay?
This is the lightning round?
This is the lightning
Okay.
round, but there's no lifeline. You can't you can't call out to Mikey for support.
Okay.
What's your favorite thing about being governor?
The people I meet.
What's your least favorite thing?
Lack of privacy when you want to have it, like having a date with Diane. Hard to do.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned?
To take a victory lap. Can I just build on that? You know, one of the things that someone pointed this out, that I bring a private sector manager sort of behavior. We finish something and I say, okay, what's next? And I realize that when we finish something, you really have to take your time and make sure everybody knows what you did.
Yep.
And understands how it connects to other things you're trying to do. So maybe that's slowed down a little bit.
I'll try to give you a victory lap here now.
Okay.
I mentioned we passed a balanced budget,
Yes.
right? 3 times now,
Yeah.
4 times.
Right.
Affirmed the bond rating. We've created jobs, right? Improved the infrastructure.
Yes.
Passed tough ethics reform.
Right.
Reformed government. You've made it more efficient with getting rid of, I think there were 5 or 6 or 7 transportation bureaucracies,
That's right.
putting it all into one.
Turnpike Authority shut down.
Blew it
That
up.
saved $250 million.
So I'm trying to give you a little victory there.
Well, we brought auto insurance rates down by
my biggest-
bringing in competition. We also we passed the most sweeping ethics reform law in 17 years, and I'm very, very proud of that.
Biggest lesson I've learned is that change is hard.
Yeah.
No matter what you try to do,
That's right.
and it could be the simplest thing under the sun, there's somebody that has a vested interest in the status quo,
You bet.
or there's someone in our business that has a vested interest in kind of playing on the fears of the folks that have a little fear for change.
Right.
And you know, I would say that I learned early on that perception is reality. People, you know, perceive something, that's their reality, and they might think one elected official is the hardest working person up there. Often it's a show horse, rather than a workhorse.
Right.
But recently I've also learned change is hard, and you've been trying to push change.
Well, we've gotten a lot done. And,
have.
you know, I think change is hard, but persistence is an important value. And I think that as the legislature and I have, as a body, worked out our own working relationship, and we understand each other a little bit better every day, I think you and your colleagues, and certainly the leadership, know that I'm going to stick to it if I think it's important and valuable, even when there's pushback. And I think I have also come to understand the pace and rhythm of the legislature, and that simply saying, listen, here's an important bill and we need action now is not enough. That there's got to be time for people to understand it, to digest it, to get feedback from their constituents as well, to do the homework, and then have a thoughtful debate about it.
Someone once drew an analogy between lawmaking and sausage making. That's
Yeah.
often an ugly process, but the end result is usually pretty good.
Yeah.
You mentioned Diane Bemis Patrick, a very accomplished attorney, a very good person.
Yes, she is.
How does she like you being governor?
Most days she likes it. You know, it's an acquired taste. You know from your experience with your and Mary's experience. But I think it's that thing where you get to meet all these wonderful people, as I said, but then it takes you twice as long to get through the grocery store when you're trying to just do your marketing, or when you are. She says she feels like she can't go out anymore without her hair made up and makeup on and a pair of cutoffs. So there's that to get used to, but there's so many good things that outweigh.
All right, here's the final question. In your experience at the State House, who have you found to be the single most effective, I wouldn't even say state senator, I'd say legislator?
Well, you want me to give you a big bear hug right here?
It's an election year for all of us.
No.
Hey, thanks a lot.
It's great to be with you, Brian. Thank you.
All right.